Thank you very much. And paradoxically, this is about body image, and I don't feel comfortable as a Black person in my 60s. I don't feel attractive, and I juxtaposed it to the white presenters. So I'm really articulating a feeling that's really important for me as a Black man in this world. Hopefully we'll see the presentations in a moment. I'll talk through the presentations and just give you some example, because I'm just waiting for them to be actually, thank you very much indeed. I was really concerned that when we talk about race, we don't talk about whiteness. And we don't talk about the important feature of whiteness in terms of how it informs research concepts and how it's absence for co-production. So this is really important in terms of looking at the body, how the body is constructed and demonized through trends of whiteness, but also how the body has moved towards a diagnosis. So in this presentation, I'm going to reflect on my lived experiences of being in prison in the mental health system, but also sectioning people because their racialized body did not fit the norm. And last, I'm going to say some of the changes we need to address in statutory services, particularly to measure important legislation, the Mental Health Use of Forces Act that applies to children, people with learning disabilities, particularly the overrepresentation of Black people who have been murdered, killed and destroyed in our mental health services is of crucial political importance. So in the next slide, I want to start off with something that's quite important to me. This was a really important moment about the worth of the Black body in different spaces. This is Faris Baramba. Some of you may not remember this. This is a Black footballer who's worth £6 million. In another context, his body is worth nothing. This is how sport positions the value of the Black body. The picture below is Faris had a cardiac arrest. He was actually, his body was dead for about 48 minutes. But for me why was his body so much more valuable than other Black bodies that have not had the opportunity to be resuscitated and not to fall victim of a society where there is no value to the Black body? It's actually becoming what I call dehumanized. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm trying to contextualize why I think this is happening. And when we look at the body, the body for me should be an invincible, non-objective entity, but it's not. Before we are born, we are racialized. Our body are racialized by biological scientific methods. And if you look at the right-hand side, this is the internal workings of the body that should be exempt from constructions of racism. But we look at the history of medical science and medical racism, it's not. The Black body is medicalized internally. But if we look at one of the most devastating diagnostic framework, DSM-5, and I'm looking at dysphoria disorder, which is, I think is really important. These definitions for me kind of like strike a chord. A preoccupation with one or more perceived defects or flaws in physical appearance that are not observable. For me, this is really important. They are not observable, but they appear slight to others. So what is it about the Black body that we don't see, but others do see, that leads them being a sort of a delusion within the white-centric eyes? Just going to go to the next one, please. And I think this is the reason why, because the body is racialized politically because it has a particular positioning, yeah? And so to understand its positioning, we need to understand how it's been constructed philosophically, historically, over the period of slavery, the post-colonial period, and where we are in, some people claim, a post-colonial society. But why is it violated? Why is this obsession to violate the Black body within our existing systems? Would it be the system, the school system with poor Black girl that was searched, the criminal justice system, the high percentage of the Black men who are actually losing their lives, particularly how the mental health system is replicating a particular culture that's very, very similar to slavery. And so to begin to challenge that, we need to depoliticize and look at the racialized dysphoric disorder of the Black body. But we need to dismantle whiteness and how it constructs it. And I think this is the first thing we're going to do today. And in the next picture, hopefully, as we move on, we move on to the next one. This is where I start shitting myself and start telling jokes. Oh, fantastic. Just listen to this picture.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with black children. He asked them to choose between a black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you liked best or that you'd like to play with?
This one. I like that one.
Show me.
Okay. This one.
That one?
This one. I like a flavor with this.
And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
She's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And can you give, and why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And why do you think that's a nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you?
That moment when the black child is asked to point out what looks like you is a painful reflection of how race has actually infiltrated our cognitive software, and what Fannin said has led to what we call nigrophobia, the internalization of not wanting to be black. And this is, for me, is articulated in the experience of being diagnosed with schizophrenia through the prison system and the mental health system, and to realize my body changes depending on the space and the people that I'm with in terms of my construction. This poem outlines it, and that one space I can be dangerous, threatening, and difficult. But the space of blackness, when I'm known to who I am, I'm friendly, I'm delicate, and confused. But in another space, I'm articulate, I'm badly presented. But more confusingly, in the latter part, which is a feature of what's taking place, I think, in the mental health systems, up and down the mental health units, I'm in hospital, I'm overtly medicated, I'm controlled, I'm misunderstood. The black body then has no rights, no identity. It becomes an objective of theory. It becomes objectified. But this objectification is a reflection about how it's been concealed through the whiteness of the translation of the black body. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more detail in the next slide, because I know I haven't got a lot of time. This is my history, or her story, as a black child, a black young person who moved from hospital to Morsey Hospital. And I realized I was activating a past that was predetermined. My body had already been given an identity before I was living out that identity through the vision construction of whiteness. And one of the biggest writers for me is a book by Cartwright. He talks about dephramania, how we are imprisoned by the slavery of whiteness, and how the mental health system replicates that identity, which we actually take on. And race becomes a diagnosis. It's an historical trauma. But what it's representing is a white psychosis, a whiteness not even aware of what it actually does and how it does it, and the damage it does to the black body, but more importantly, to the black man and the black psyche. So here I am, this dyslexia, hearing voices. I'm actually being diagnosed. So I'm actually wondering, why is it I've been locked in a prison? Why I've been restrained? Why I've been medicated? Why I've been given it? What is it about my body that is so threatening to the spirit of whiteness, that doesn't want to look at itself and its own internal madness? So if I go to the next slide and begin to articulate this notion, George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd and the horrific murders of black men up and down the American states, our urban areas and hospital, is one of the most frightening indictments of modern society, to the point where Sandra Solomon, the president of the American Psychological Association, said, we're living in a racism as a pandemic. And he makes the plea that the epistemology of diagnosis, DSM-5, is an enduring pattern how the black body deviates markedly from the expectation of the individual culture. This is a really crucial marker fact. It's how we construct the body that makes it a problem. And we need to look at how racism in itself is a mental disorder that fails to look at the lived ontological framework of Black men like myself and other Black people. Two pictures here that actually epitomize this big disparity. George Floyd and Simon Wesley, who's responsible for the implementation of the Mental Health Act, who actually did something that was crucially revolutionary and deviant. He imposed and did not remove something called Section 17A, which is where Black men, or mostly Black men, are actually sectioned and actually put on an audit, which means they have to come back. This is the modern version of deprimania in relation to the Black body in our postmodern society. And it's crucial we begin to make these links between the body in different spaces, historically, contemporary, and also in our modern spaces in British society. But as we go into the next slide, we've got to really actually articulate where this happened. And the work we've been doing with Whiteness is not to look at co-production, to look at what we call pre-production. These are the spaces in which the body is defined. And we're looking at the period of slavery, which is an important educational model for a white dominant culture. We looked at Cartwright and how he perceived the body. But we also look at modern theorists such as Jung and Freud that actually split the Black body from the mind. So the body is just the body. But also it becomes culturally detached from the reality of its identity, African society. And then it becomes demonized on so many different levels. Because what has happened in this period of time is the denial of the African theorists, models, practice, and theory that humanize the Black body, that actually understands that the symbolism of the Black body is a threat, and it's a behavioral threat to the dominant culture. I'm going to go into that a little bit more detail. So when I was doing this paper yesterday, I was trying to understand the historical context of the body. I mean, if we see the picture on the right, it's really despairing to see this process of dehumanization, the person as a person. But when I began to read and understand things, I found Fanon's work is really crucial. And I think the other two workers have alluded to something called skin bourgeois, and this deferential to whiteness and the white mask. And I am so deferential to wanting to be white and have the privileges and entitlement to be white that I have lost my Black skin. But in that, it's been taken away from me in terms of what institutional cultures in British society have done to the Black body. Why they are 4 times more likely to detain. We need to look at why are white people 3 times less likely. That tells us about the value of the Black body in juxtaposition to the Black body. But also at this time and moment, I'm really concerned that Black men, the Black body, written by an excellent paper, and I hope she's here today, Ajibin Lewis, looks at why Black bodies are wanted for restraint and research, which means there's a fascination of actually trying to find out how we control the Black body in the mental health system. Let's go to the next one. And the reason why I thought I would understand this, and Bill Fulford and Anna is fantastic at looking at European philosophy, because it's a body of knowledge. It's a philosophical construction of the Black body that is made rational within the psychoactive system, and then leads to control of the Black body within what we call the neuromarket control. So when we hear about Socrates and Pinner and Pritchard, we can see some awful demonizations of what we perceive as the other, the cultural other, that's entered our cognitive software. And it's so institutional in the way we actually look at the world. Each of them actually made a plea for a paranoid personality, irrationality, judgment and memory, moral sanctity. These were demonizations of the Black experience before the Black experience was allowed to have its own authentic Black experience. And if I go to the next slide, I just want to kind of continue this theme about European whiteness. The Black body is mad. The Black body, if we look at Foucauldian's work or Goffman's work, into the institutional kind of a research into Black men institution, it's actually underpinned by these dangerous stereotypes: criminal, weak, no capacity for true moral feelings. And also this is linked to childhood development. And is actually an intrinsic part of the development of a new type of eugenic theory in mental health and the body. So what's the implications of these theoretical interventions and what's being constructed and described? We're going to go with that to the next link. And I saw that the black body becomes a personality disorder. Not only is it kind of demonized, it has a personality disorder because it has a sense of disturbance, behavioral tendencies. It also is based upon an impairment. We now have data that shows that the black body is more likely to be diagnosed with a psychosis rather than a personality disorder. These pictures actually historically reflect the defiance to whiteness from taking a knee, the Black Power movement, to taking a knee in sport. These are also symbolic references to what the Black Power movement was actually fighting against, what taking a knee was actually talking about. It was the demonization and the abuse of the black body in sport, in education, in criminal justice, in mental health. And so if I just go on to the next slide, some people won't remember this face. This is the most important face in British mental health in the last 50 years. And I think David's probably know who this is. This is Christopher Clunius. And this is where the racial bodies is a denial of inexperienced behavior, and whiteness becomes a personality disorder because the perception is and was with Christopher that, so am I going to need to, do you want me to shut up? And so what happens is that Christopher Clunius actually was perceived as the big back caricature of the black community. And he was actually diagnosed with a process called paranoia. If I go to the next one, because I think I need to move, even though I'm looking at my time, I thought I was well in time. This is my mate, Boris Johnson. We're good friends, and we often have a watermelon together. But it's really important that how a huge political figure has actually demonized the black community as watermelons and piccadillys, and how that's translated into some of the characters which demonize black men in sport to the point in which they're actually demonized as gorillas and animals and monkeys. But we even need to look at why is Johnson like this? And I think there's this narcissistic quality with him that enables him to actually demonize black people without even thinking about how he is racialized with a superior culture as a white person. Let's go to the next one.
Colin, you have plenty of time.
Oh, well, I thought you told me to shut up. It was getting boring.
No, not at all. No, plenty of time, Colin.
Okay, shit. All right then. All right, okay. This one, look at these two pictures. I want to look at the differentiation construction of the burden. This is me, and this is Bill. If you listen to these two stories, you can see how we perceive our body and mind completely different. So this is me talking.
They don't see Colin, they don't see me as an individual and an identity with a specific history. They see a catalogue of black men who come off this stereotype of being big and dangerous and angry, and that's equated to people who then are outside their cultural understanding. And the Mental Health Act reproduces that legally in terms of how it looks at black people. It reproduces that culturally in terms of the stereotypes it makes about black people's lives, their families, their patterns, their cultures.
So I'm saying that, but I want to listen to Bill's story because he says something completely different.
With Colin and this group is that, of course, that very reliability, right at the very heart of what we regard as best science, immediately excludes minority voices. And if the system is predominantly white, that means it immediately excludes black voices. Yeah. So the very reliability, it's not so much that, so if white supremacy actually is embodied in the very theoretical basis on which we're trying to change things. Now, I hasten to add, the reason why I hang in with this group and working with Colin despite my ignorance and continuing difficulty of understanding what it's all about is because I think what Colin's brought to this whole discussion is something really quite novel. It is about inside, outside, and it's captured for me in the phrase getting beyond the colour bar. And of course, it doesn't mean literally the colour bar. What it means is getting beyond a black-white standoff, Jewish, Aryan standoff, whatever those tribal standoffs.
Yeah, so I think Bill was saying something really unusually deep and profound about how we are our constructed by race and how we see our body through race. I'm not going to go for those points there, but the black body has no epistemological existence. It has no scientific reputation that is legitimized unless it's objectified by whiteness. And we can see this through something that's happened recently. The introduction of the mental health white paper has further demonized the black body as something that needs to be captivated, controlled, re-educated, and actually imprisoned. I'm just going to go to the next couple of sections. Let's hope I've got enough time to finish this off very
Colin,
quickly. Beg your pardon?
No, that was just some of the videos from the previous slide. Sorry about that.
Okay, then, good. So you know, what we're now saying that we can't actually talk about the epistemological value of the black body unless we elevate the voices and perspectives of people's lived experiences. And at the moment, there is no lived experience theoretical framework that has parity with the clear leadership in mental health systems. So the value of a co-production is actually a mythology. That's why Malcolm X says, if we are not careful, the newspapers will have us hating people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. That's what the mental health system actually is doing at the moment in relation to the black body. And I'm telling you how it's doing this in the next couple of slides before I finish. You know, it's through killing and murdering and demonization. These are 3 pictures of Sean Riggs killed in the Mental Health Act. Dalen Atkinson killed by the police. Dana Taylor killed by the police, to the point where the modern legal control of the body is actually epixelized in what Adjie says in the statement. The police, clinicians, and all staff involved in mental health care must hear the pain, loss, and devastation of being told your son, brother, sister, daughter, partner will never return because they've been killed at the heart of the states. And then there's a legalized murdering of the black body, which we take for granted and do not challenge in terms of what's happened in restraint. So what's happened now, very quickly, before I finish, is that Adjie Lewis is here today, and she's an icon of an international global change, because for the first time ever, we have the Mental Health Use of Forces Act. I think that's an atrocious act. This act is trying to protect the over violation and murder of black people in mental health units. And what, in terms of a training manual, Adjie has put together a training manual that looks at redefining these kind of like historical definitions of slavery in terms of physical, mechanical seclusion, to humanize them in terms of race equality practices. She's also looking at how do we inform practices that are informed by the lived experiences? How do we challenge policy and data? How do we look at co-production? This evening will be the opening of the European Championships. You will see maybe but one black player in that thing. There is something going on in this British society that's really concerning about what is seen as the black body. And lastly, this is what the challenge that we have and what we're trying to do with the Whiteness and Race Equality Network as the last slide. So we actually devised our own training. Our own training is lived experience, racialized, looking at firstly the historical context of the use of force in relation to community, but understanding it through the case of Alana Lewis. We are redefining the definitions that make the black body worthless and dehumanized. And we are trying to apply the human rights value principles that are an intricate part of the act. And lastly, as I finished, I don't want to show this video because it's a really sad video. One thing I don't want to do is cry, but Alana Smith lost his life and produced this fantastic video. What we've done with the Whiteness Equality Solid is set up modules, and we want people to read the modules to learn about race equality in the black body, how to challenge policy and practices, how to really look at race equality in mental health, and also to ensure the black body has value, has reputation, and also should be safeguarded as any other body in the mental health system. Thank you.